put some meat on the bones. What happened when you died? Not saying then that the afterlife is a really dominant England team display with a glorious headed goal involving Peter Crouch.
To take that time out, if you can take a month or two out and really think more deeply about what's going on.
On today's Engaging Marketeer, I am speaking with Nigel Davies from Pin Creative. Now, Nigel has got two very exciting things about him. Firstly, he is a brand guru and was actually responsible for the rebrand of a very small company you might have heard of called Ford. And also, he died. He died and was clinically dead for 29 minutes in something they call downtime. So I'm going to be asking Nigel, what brought that on? What happened? What did he see? How did it affect his life? And where he's going from there? So let's speak to Nigel. So I think there's really only one place I think I can start with you.
Yep.
And that's, you died.
Well, yeah, that's the short story.
That's the short story. Let's put some meat on the bones. What happened when you died?
Well, so what happened was I went to the post office one day and had a very severe cardiac arrest, basically. And obviously I've got no memory of that. I was just sort of
so you can't remember a thing about it?
I can't remember a thing about it. And all I do remember is waking up I remember waking up and someone saying, "Well, do you know where you are?" And I went, "Am I at a school?" Because I was sort of looking at the ceiling, and that's probably the last time I stared at a ceiling for very long. Maybe we should stare at ceilings more often. And they went, "No, you're in." Yeah, well, have a look at ceilings more often. Stop looking at your feet. Look up. But and then obviously it kind of transpired. I was in hospital, and they explained the event, and then they sort of kind of gently sort of tell you what happened, and then you start reading medical notes. So I had it was an eruption in an artery basically that just collapsed and stopped blood and oxygen to my heart and brain, and they call it downtime, and the downtime for me was 29 minutes, and most people don't survive that. For some reason I did, which was great because I'm still here to talk about it. And it was obviously, I think it was quite a shock to people who'd been around me, because they'd got to the point of discussing, end of life, who switches me off and all that sort of stuff, because they just assume that you're not going to survive. You're down to 1% survival rate by then if you've gone into hospital. And you've gone through, they gave me stents and things like that. If anyone's ever had, or lots of people have had these things that know about them. And yeah, I just woke up one day and I say, I'm at a school. No, I'm in a hospital having had a serious event. And then sort of start piecing it all together again afterwards.
Did you have any sort of symptoms before then? Any warning that was going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, there was symptoms before, but wasn't aware what the symptoms were, if that makes sense. So, and I'd totally forgotten until I came back home, back to the desk where I am right now, and there was like a blue inhaler on my desk. I was thinking, well, I'm not asthmatic. I don't have any kind of things like that. And then I remember that about 2 or 3 weeks before, I'd spoken to the doctor and said I was having just a bit of chest pains, breathing problems, and he just said, well, I think you may be asthmatic. I think you should get a blue inhaler and send me on my way. Maybe what he said, oh my God, you're going to have a heart attack in 3 weeks. We should get a chest x-ray done and sort of unblock anything that's going to happen. But no one's got that amount of foresight. So, but nothing sort of longer term than that, apart from the kind of typical, bad living, not exercising lifestyle that most of us seem to lead. So,
is that what you've been told is pretty much the cause of it?
Well, I don't. I like a pint of Guinness. So
who doesn't? Who doesn't?
Who doesn't? Yes, and there's more stuff about Guinness that I can tell you about when I was in my sort of delirious state. But actually, it was probably one of the first things that I said to the doctor, or the last things probably. He's like, will I be able to still drink Guinness? He went, yeah, no reason you can. Will I be able to run a marathon? Yeah, if you want. So I don't think it was, no one really knows, not necessarily hereditary, it's just one of those things that happen. Anything happen like that to you? unexpected kind of,
Nothing unexpected. Well, that's what the most unexpected thing is. I've got scoliosis, which is a curved spine.
Oh.
Which I didn't know anything about until somebody pointed out that there was a lump sticking out my back when I was in school. Went in for a checkup and an X-ray, and saw a scan on the screen, an X-ray on the screen of a spine in the shape of a letter S, and thought that guy's in trouble, and it was mine.
Yeah.
So that was very little notice, but it wasn't a sort of a, ooh, what's just happened. So I probably had about 2-3 weeks notice before that had to be operated on. But yeah, that came from nowhere as well.
Yeah, I guess like a lot of these, I don't even know how you would. I mean, I guess people talk about symptoms and what might happen, but you just don't know. I mean, for me, I sort of just. I mean, the thing for me is that I did lose some memory from about a week before, which was a shame. Yeah, nearly a week, because if people are listening, but if people can see, then I'm in a room full of records, and music's one of my passions. And the previous week I'd been to several gigs, one in I went to see Public Image Limited in Bath, and I sort of vaguely remember that was about a week before. But my all-time favourite band, The Other, did 3 gigs that week, and I went to 2 of them, and I have no recollection of those whatsoever, which is really disappointing, because they are one of my favourite bands. I'd never seen them live, and since then Matt Johnson has been diagnosed with a severe throat thing, and he'll probably never sing again. So it's kind of like, it's sort of, he went into hospital a few years ago, slightly unexpectedly as well, I think. And I when I woke up, I checked my phone, because that's kind of like the first thing you do when you wake up anyway. But and there was this sort of message like, yeah, I'll meet you in the Lamb and Flag at 8:00. I was thinking, well, who's that and what that's from? And I'd gone and bought a ticket to go and see the Troxy, sorry, and totally forgotten. I'd met a random person, bought a ticket off them, and I'd seen them the night before with my friends in Brixton, but no recollection of the gig whatsoever, which is very disappointing.
Wow.
Well, probably not that serious compared.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I'd be pretty fuming, to be honest.
Well, yeah. I mean, it was a bit disappointing. Added to the fact that Matt Johnson probably will never perform again, as well. So that was it. There was 3 gigs that week. There was one at the Royal Albert Hall, and I didn't go to that one. And they have released that on vinyl. I have bought it, but I can't quite bring myself to listen to it yet.
Still a bit bitter.
Yeah, you do get a bit of PTSD when you've got anything sort of unexpected happens. I think you do get these little memories and flashbacks and things like that.
I mean, I don't know what's worse. Is it worse that you could have had this happen and missed the gig, but you actually went?
Well, yes, there is that I did actually go to. I was present at the gig, so I can say that I was there. I'd like
is
to
that
have
worse,
remembered it. I don't know. I think, well, kind of clearly what would have been worse is going to the gig, remembering it for a couple of days, and then just dropping dead. But
okay, that would be a lot worse.
that would be quite considerably worse. But
yeah, when you put it in perspective.
Yeah, I think maybe just listen to because the live version from the Royal Albert Hall was probably similar to the next 2 nights.
And I imagine every person you've told this to has asked the same question. When you were offline, or downtime, I believe it was, did you have any image, any memory of that, any feeling?
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely right. It's a question that everyone inquires about. And the downtime bit is the 29 minutes when, that's when everything's stopped. Then what they do, they operated on me, put me into what they call like an enforced coma. So they're keeping me alive with drugs and morphine and all that sort of stuff. And that's the bit that you do remember. But because you're so, you're not conscious of it, but there's definitely things happening. And there's loads of things that I remember. And it's clearly caused by what was happening around me, but not... not conscious of it. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So one of my memories is it was actually not just watching, but being part of a Channel 4 satirical sitcom set in a hospital. And it was like every day, every night, it was like we were having to get ready we were making this next episode of the sitcom set in this hospital. And that will just be me thinking about, right, I'm in a hospital, I'm probably subconsciously aware of it, and how do we have some fun in this? Probably watch a lot of Channel 4 satire, and so my mind just made up, and it was really quite compelling, getting ready for the camera. I remember there was this kind of large chap on one of the sets and things like that, and he was always sort of part of the jokes or whatever. And the other thing about, if you ever experience this, or maybe everyone has different experiences, it was like quite relentless. It was like every week, but it's like happening lots and lots of times, when maybe it only happened once, but it felt like it was happening repeated. But that's just triggers of what I'm seeing around, what's influencing me from around me, rather than the actual reality or anything. Well, actually, maybe it is a bit reality. Maybe it was a bit satirical, the hospital. I don't know.
There's not stranger than true life, I suppose.
Yeah, maybe that. And then at the same time, it was at the time of the previous World Cup, and what I do remember, and I think I kind of like football. In a sort of, I kind of collect the football stickers, and I always get excited about the World Cup, put my World Cup chart up and all that sort of stuff.
Me too.
And I think, yeah, well, and why wouldn't you? Because that's one of the best things.
Yeah.
But I think that the event happened, I think it was the 8th of June, and it was the Friday that the World Cup was starting. So I'd got all the build-up and the excitement, but none of the experience. And as I understand it, in the qualifying matches, if any footballers are listening, they'll probably know exactly what the matches are, how they did. But I think England played quite well, and so people were playing this to me on the radio and trying to keep me, Nigel, England are playing tonight. But what my memory is of, like those cameras that fly around the pitch, like being in a camera flying around the pitch, and England kind of, I remember, I'm sure Peter Crouch was playing, which I don't think he was in reality, but they sort of strung together like 10 headers or something, head, goal. And it was like, wow, I was like, I've never seen England be that in control of a ball before. So again, my mind was sort of creating a sort of nonsense version of what was happening in the actual reality, which is quite, but the fact that I can remember it is also quite weird, I guess. But you don't know. So when everyone asks about, what's it like the afterlife? Well, they won't be able to tell you because they didn't survive it. So don't say that this is the afterlife. This was clearly the current life. That was still kind of real life.
So
that makes sense.
You're not saying then that the afterlife is a really dominant England team display with a glorious headed goal involving Peter Crouch?
Unfortunately, I can't guarantee that it is. But what I would say is that if anyone who's sort of thinking about these things, is that you do I was creating the best version of my life, and I saw that as quite a positive thing. But if it had carried on, maybe I hadn't come back, woken up or whatever happened, then maybe I'd just be like living my best life, and Peter Crouch would be continuing to score headers for England, and that Channel 4 satirical sitcom would have won loads of awards or something. So
if you can remember any of the sitcom, you could always write it.
Well, there is that, but I guess probably there's been enough satirical sitcoms on Channel 4 about hospitals, maybe one too many. But yeah, there's loads of other stuff I remember. I can tell. The other significant, one of the other significant things is that Arctic Monkeys, one of my favourite bands, had just released Tranquility Base Hotel and Casino, and it was the album that came out after AM, if you're an Arctic Monkeys fan. And I think a lot of people were disappointed because it was sort of slightly loungy, casual. Are you big into music? But it's kind of slow paced.
I'm not a big Arctic Monkeys fan, no.
Yeah, and so, but it wasn't all the rock stuff people had been excited about. And actually, I remember it coming out, and it must have been a few weeks before, and I just thought, this is brilliant. I absolutely loved it. So again, I think people were probably either playing that album to me just because they know that I liked it. But I do remember hanging out with Alex Turner and giving him advice about how to put on the stage set for the tour that they were going to do with this album later in the year. And it was all, and it was one of those weird things that when I did sort of woke up, and you know, anyone who's been anything like that, you're in a very delirious, weird state. But I remember saying, get me a notebook now. I've got loads of ideas of how to put the stage set on for the Arctic Monkeys tour. But then I didn't do it. I didn't do anything. I should. It's like one of those things you should just sort of write things down as soon as you can. But I forgot. I just forgot.
Do you know, I've heard a lot of people say that. Keep a notebook by the side of the bed, so as soon as you wake up, write down what you were dreaming about.
Yeah, and what I do now, and I never used to do this, is that I do on my devices keep a much more active little notebook kind of thing. And I know I do creativity and stuff, but I know if I have an idea there and then, if I don't write it down, then it'll go. And I think that's one really important thing to do, actually. Getting onto really serious stuff about how to manage creative thinking. But yeah, if you've got an idea, write it down. Don't think you're going to remember it.
No, because you won't. Yeah, there's too many thoughts go into the head for you to remember something.
Yeah, and it's not like, you know, it's not like an Alzheimer's old age forgetful thing. But you're right, more stuff keeps going in, and you just lose track of that thing.
Yeah. What year was this that this happened? I was trying to work out what World Cup it was.
Yeah, it was 2008, so it was 5 years ago, because we had so it's 2008 in June 2008. So now I've been. It's kind of funny because you do get the, it's like the anniversary. Some people think I'm 5 years old now, which is maybe more appropriate. But it's like, is my birthday from the day that the event happened or the day that I woke up?
So that's sometime in June? 2018 then?
No, 2018, sorry, yes.
Yeah, right. I was going to say, what year is this? Am I dreaming now?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 2018, right. It's 23 now, isn't it? 5 years ago, yeah. So it's still kind of recent enough. And, you know, part of the journey really was, is coming out of that in 2018 in the summer, so 5 years ago, and then having a year or so just kind of like not really understanding what had happened, what's going on, but, you know, sort of recovering really. And by the time I'd sort of got a bit more focus, thought about my work and my design stuff, that was end of 2019. So I thought, right, I'm going to get back into work. And then February 2020, COVID hit. And so the rest of the world caught up with me in the weirdness of like kind of not understanding. I was like, I'm already there. I've got no idea what's going on. Welcome to my world. But it also meant that I probably didn't become too active too soon. It sounds like, you know, that was getting on for nearly a year and a half, but it needed that sort of recovery time. So I got then more enforced recovery time from COVID. So I sort of possibly, you know, I think if I'd have been just working at normal level and then COVID hit, it would have been weird, but I hadn't got back up to speed. So it was like I'd sort of been in 2 years of lockdown almost anyway by then.
So COVID kind of worked out for you at the right time.
It was sort of beneficial, apart from financially very devastating because I wasn't working. But you know, but I think mentally and probably professionally, it probably was there was some benefits to that.
And how has the whole thing changed your outlook on life now? The way you work, the way you eat, the way you live.
Yeah, I think. I mean, a lot of people sort of say, you know, you reappraise your life, and you know, you've got another chance. I don't see it like that at all. It's more of just a continuation of the day-to-day things that you were doing before. I definitely haven't necessarily cut down on the bad things of, you know, I don't smoke. I mean, and if I did smoke beforehand, I would probably totally cut that out. But because the doctor said it was okay to drink Guinness, I still drink Guinness. I probably, you know, there are things that, because you get a lot tireder a lot quicker. And again, this is probably not a bad thing. I won't drink as much as I might have done previously. And I don't like stronger alcohol and all those things. So there's maybe like an enforced slowdown of that anyway. but I've not. They put you on like a recovery program for exercise and stuff, but there was some side effects for me in kind of motion and body stuff, which had been quite tricky to manage. So it's still quite difficult for me to stand up without using hands and arms. You know, the sit stand thing I can't do. So a little bit of mobility, but you know, I mean, actually, the doctors, whenever I see them, I've got this slight mobility issue, they goes, well, that wasn't our job. Our job was to save your life. We did that. You know, deal with it type thing, which is kind of fine, but a bit frustrating. So nothing's really changed for me, apart from I do get a lot tireder. But I think the biggest impact, or the bigger impact really, was thinking about my work and my sort of approach to the world in terms of work. And I think that was probably a combination of what happened to me and then the kind of stuff that was happening in terms of lockdown and remote working. And actually, if lockdown hadn't created this whole remote working environment that everyone suddenly accepted, things might still be quite tricky for me work-wise, because just sort of going into town or kind of, you know, getting a tube, walking across the city, walking on the tube, getting back, you know, just is really still quite exhausting. But suddenly everyone went, yeah, let's get on a Zoom meeting. Well, that's brilliant, you know. And so I started networking, and I did quite a lot of networking in the first year, talking to a lot of people about what they wanted from branding and the sort of stuff that I do, and then actually kind of networking in different countries, meeting people from thousands of miles away, and that was really kind of quite exciting and eye-opening, I think, in terms of what I do for my work.
So it's an interesting thing. So you think then COVID and the fact that everybody is now using video meetings nationally and internationally, and the world's a much smaller place, has actually been good for your business?
Yeah, I think I'd always enjoyed working internationally, and so you know, but you know, I did a meeting in Chicago once that we kind of flew out on a plane early in the morning, got to Chicago in the evening, did a meeting, got back on another plane, came back to London not quite 36 hours later.
Wow.
But it was, we didn't stay because we couldn't really afford to stay in the hotel, but we had to go to this meeting, and it was just sort of, you just think, well, that's crazy. You know, that doesn't make any sense. Yeah. You know, so and that's a really extreme example, but yeah, I've done a lot of international business travel that now you would argue was very wasteful of time, money, resource, all of those things. What I think has been good is that I've had to adapt how I work, obviously, because we do workshops, they're sticking post-it notes and, you know, being really interactive with people, and it's good that you can do that again now, and I do enjoy that. But actually thinking about how you present information to people via screens to keep them on track, even things like what size you put words on the page that you're going to show people, really kind of helps keep them informed on the journey. And then you add in a bit of technology, that IA stuff that helps bring everything together. It's making a much more, I think, more involved thing for the people that I'm working with. So I like working with business owners that want to learn stuff, and I think it's really helping them.
Right. So considering your business, then it how was it working before all of this happened?
Yeah, so I think before the event, I'm an independent brand consultant. So for me it's about combining strategy and creativity, taking it up into, you know, brand identity creation, but not delivery. So the sort of projects I was doing before, and I worked totally independently, were sort of kind of small branding projects that were typically, you know, you'd go and do a workshop with someone, you then go off and kind of do some thinking, go back to their office, present some thoughts about the strategy and the messaging and the positioning. Then you go away and you kind of come up with some identity, and you talk to the board of directors, show them some options, have your boards or projecting it. So it was quite a time-consuming thing, but it's probably at a more corporate level. So I just totally dropped off the radar, really. I think some people thought had died because people had heard sort of what had happened to me, and I had no visibility. My main sort of channels are like LinkedIn and stuff. And so when I started sort of doing again, it was a bit like starting from scratch, sort of creating a new approach to working with people about branding. And what I'd sort of observed when I came out of hospital was that even using things like mobile phones or TV remote controls, I'd totally forgotten how they worked. It was sort of, and anyone who's got aging parents, my parents are in their mid to late 80s now, and they get frustrated with devices and stuff. And you go, oh, what do you mean you can't use your mobile phone? It was just like that. I had no idea. I couldn't remember numbers over 2 digits long, all that sort of stuff. And I got a real sort of glimpse of what the sort of future's like in terms of the complications around technology specifically, and just online banking. I mean, I was throwing computers around, because it was just. And what I did know though is that because I do branding, I've done it since I've probably done it since before I went to college, but it was kind of hardwired into me, and I could talk about branding. Sort of like ask me to just turn the TV over and, no, I don't know how to do it. You want to know about how to create a brand? Yeah, I'll tell you exactly how to create a brand. And so someone suggested that I just write down everything that I know about branding, and I started doing that on Post-it notes and things. And then it sort of struck me that maybe a lot of people don't understand branding like I don't understand kind of remote controls at the moment. Yeah. So I've kind of created this thing called Untangle Your Brand, but it's evolved since then. I didn't ever have a sort of product like that, but it's a way of trying to demystify the branding process, make it simpler for business owners to actually have more control of their business and their brands. And that's a totally different way of me thinking about it. Whereas before I was waiting for the next project to come along or pitching for work and stuff. So I'm being much more direct with business owners and sort of independent consultants, coaches, to help them know all these things that I know about branding that I think will be useful for their business. And that's been kind of really enjoyable. It's sort of the starting point of that journey, but it's taken this amount of time to get it a bit more together.
It is almost like what happened to you and the frustrations you faced afterwards has actually been really good for your business, because it's allowed you to have a light bulb moment and work out how to explain what you do and package what you do for other businesses.
Well, yeah, totally. And I'd sort of say that to anyone that you find, if you're in business and you sort of going through the motions a bit, and don't have a major heart event to do this.
Yeah, that's good advice. Don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that bit. But to take that time out, if you can take a month or two out and really think more deeply about what's going on, and having that reset, COVID helped. And a lot of people did it during COVID, and I noticed there was a massive influx of people who kind of like sort of took jobs, or I'm going to be a coach, I'm going to teach and do all this, have an online thing, and really engaged about it, and then they've all gone back into their corporate jobs again because that's kind of what they knew, and that's absolutely fine. No issue with that. But that's not what I knew before, so I couldn't go back into that security of the corporate world. I kind of had to make my independent brand consulting work. But as you say, I think I'm created something that's probably more long-term purposeful for both me and the businesses, rather than just sitting there coming up with brand stuff.
So you mentioned it a few moments ago. You must have known I'm going to ask you, how do you create a brand?
How do you create a brand?
How do you create a brand?
Well, I think so. What I say is that my definition of a brand is something that is about the emotional connection that the customer, the person buying the product or service, has with that product or service. So to create a brand, you need to create an emotional connection, and it doesn't matter what that product or service is. So, I will walk past Starbucks to get to Costa because I think the Costa hot chocolate is better than Starbucks. So I've got an emotional connection with Costa, and they've created that brand that I know that I'm gonna kind of keep on going back to, creating that loyalty. I wear Adidas, not Nike. I like New Order, so I wear Adidas. I don't do running, so I don't wear Nike. So I've got the emotional connection with Adidas. So what your task is to create that emotional connection between your audience and your product and service to make them feel like they've made the right choice. I read The Guardian, not The Telegraph, for obvious reasons. And they're all the things that you're trying to do. So how do you actually then create that emotional connection is probably the next question you might ask me. Maybe not, I don't know.
How do you create that emotional connection?
Well, I'm glad that you asked, because I never thought you would.
No, well, it was clearly my next question.
But there's, and I think when you talk to a lot of brand consultants, we're all doing the same thing, by the way. We just talk about it in different ways, and that's absolutely fine. So I got a methodology about trying to get information from the businesses so you can understand what they're all about. I talk about vision, positioning, offer, values, mission, and what I call a brand core. I call it a brand donut, and it's like a ring donut with a big bit of jam in the center. But we're all trying to do the same things, is identify these different parts of what makes up the brand and then find out what the emotional glue is. So the vision is really important, where you're going to be, the positioning, how you offset against the audience competition, values, what you believe in, the mission, the actions and activities you take, the offer, the products and services you sell. So these are all the things that make up the brand. And if you can ask the right questions and get useful answers, you've then got to find the jammy, sticky, gluey bit in the center. Not glue in the donut, that'd be rubbish. Well, maybe. So that's what you're trying to do, is get that information. And then once you've got that, you can then start to express that visually. You can start to express that verbally. Once you've understood the framework, some people use pyramids, some people might use they call it a brand house, a brand pyramid. It doesn't matter. I call mine a brand donut. That's kind of just the way I am.
You like donuts?
I'm not a big fan of donuts, actually, as it happens. But I think people just started calling my drawing like, oh, you've drawn a donut. Okay, well, fine. Yeah, let's call it a brand donut.
We'll go with that then. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll go with that. Thanks.
So can businesses do this themselves, or do they need you or somebody like you with it, or is your untangling the brand thing for someone to do themselves?
Well, actually, I do believe that I always sort of say that whenever, and I've done some big international corporate projects, the answers come from the business owners or the employees. We don't just magic stuff up, and that's always the process. You ask the questions, you interpret the answers, and you go off and you create what you need to. And I generally believe that business owners do have the answers. They do need someone to help them get it out, but that's just like anything. So with Untangle Your Brand, there is a standalone component to it, but what I tend to find is better for me to kind of hold someone's hand through a few sessions, and then there'll be enough to actually go off and do it. So I'm distilling 25 years of experience, but I've got 6 15-minute videos. Now, yes, you can watch that and do all the exercises, but you're probably going to be better off sharing some of that with someone. But they can do it a lot themselves. And recently, the people that have been through what I call Untangle Your Brand Mastery, which is these 6 sessions, I sort of give them tasks like homework. Go off and think about positioning. Think of what your brand core is. What is your jam in the center? And they come back to me. Normally they share some ideas, and then we discuss it. But they've come up with it. And then when they've got that idea, and this is the big leap, is that you then have to turn that into creative stuff, which is the harder part. And that's where you might then need a support. But any business that has answered some questions about their brand, they've managed to express their stuff in a ordered way, like following a donut or whatever, pyramid or an onion, brand onion, the creativity will be better because you've got foundations and understanding. If you just go to someone and say, I've got this business idea, can I have a logo from a website? Book it off Fiverr, you will be coming to someone in a few years' time to do it properly.
It's just going to be some generic logo that is no different to anybody else's. You mentioned how you've worked with some big corporates, and you gave the example of Costa's brand speaking to you as opposed to Starbucks. For business owners listening to this who might be startups or one-man or one-woman bands, how important is it for them to have a brand just as much as it is for somebody like PlayStation?
Yeah, so I think there's two things that I talk about here. Is that the first is that if you are a startup, the most important thing, right? You've got an idea for your business, you've kind of got to get it out there. So it goes against the advice I've just given. Get yourself a logo, get it on a website, and start selling your products and your services. You've got to sort of have proof of concept. I think people talk about minimal viable products and all that sort of stuff. You've got to kind of make that business work, and you won't have a lot of money to invest in branding. So I think as you've grown a bit and you've proven what's working and what's not working, that's the time to start investing in your brand. Maybe you've done it for a couple of years, you've reached a sort of level of sales, but again, you still don't need to spend tens and tens of thousands. But to use your example of PlayStation, the only reason that costs a lot of money, and the biggest brand that I've done, I rebranded Ford Motor Company about 20 years ago, and that cost £1 million. That looks like a logo tweak to anyone that's seen it.
Did you say Ford Motor Company?
Yeah, so Ford Motor Company, the blue oval, 2003.
I'm familiar with it. Wow.
So
I did not know that. Wow.
Well, so yeah, in 2003, I led the redesign of that blue oval, went out to Detroit. I was working for a big agency at the time, just kind of got appointed to do the project. That cost £1 million. A lot of people can't see the difference, but the reason it costs a lot of money, like the PlayStation one will, is because there's more people involved, there's more stakeholders to talk to, there's less certainty about, well, which direction should we go, and they can spend money having 15 people create 50 different versions before they settle on the version. If you're a independent business owner just starting out, you don't have the money, but you don't have the complexity of a large firm making decisions or teams making decisions on your behalf. So it can be a lot more efficient. You can actually just, use your instinct quite a lot. Working with a decent professional, who actually can visualize your ideas, you'll get there quite quickly without the sort of budget. So it's only really when you involve lots of people, it starts to cost a lot of money.
And we work with some large clients, nothing quite like what you've done there. And as you mentioned, the lots of people does tend to be the problem. Whenever it's a committee to decide and there's a lot of stakeholders in it, it always takes a lot longer. There's always more compromise with the work you're doing. How did you find working with such a huge brand with so many people involved?
Yeah, I mean, ironically, with the Ford project, and again, this is the sort of crazy days of 2003. So I was the lead designer. So I was primarily in the office doing all the work, and then it was like the senior sort of, used to call them bag handlers, would go and do the presentations. But they were flying from London to Detroit on a weekly basis with our big boards of kind of printed off, this is a new version of the logo, to present it and then come back, give us feedback, and actually give us give us some feedback on it. So I wasn't as directly involved in those meetings, but again, that's sort of a ridiculous thing that would never happen now. So my experience of managing kind of things like that actually then started after I did the Ford logo. I then got more into some strategy kind of work and actually moved away from design and got into more of the insight and trying to get I do a lot of work around what we call brand architecture, so organizing different products and services so they make sense. And that was when I was then put in front of boards of directors to actually kind of bring them all together under a common goal. And I think I've just got a skill of managing complex stakeholder groups. And it's all about making sure that people are listened to, but also making sure you're giving them clear direction, making decisions, and keeping them informed along the process, so that they know they're not getting a wool pulled over their eyes by some sort of flaky creative that comes in and just sort of says, "It's all pink today. See you later." That's not how you do it. It's certainly with PLCs and things like that. So I think I just become good at talking to those kinds of people in a way. Again, it does go back to what I'm doing now with demystifying branding, but just a CEO or board level director, and I've done some sort of FTSE 250 things and big law firms, they've got no idea of what branding is really either. And that's not like in a patronizing way. You've just got to make it clear and accessible and human to them, so they don't feel stupid, so that they, as I say, can make an informed choice about something, and not actually feel that, like I say, they're just getting sold some rubbish, and paying a lot of money for it. And all those things about with those sort of C-suite type people, honesty, just say it as it is. Don't fluff about with your answers. Just be open and honest.
So there's a lot of people skills to what you do then.
Well, yeah, I think that's right, and it's probably one of those things that you don't necessarily, when you start out in design, think that you need. You think a lot of people think you need good drawing skills, but I still draw like I drew when I was 7 years old, I think. But and that doesn't mean that I was a good drawer at 7 years old either. So yeah, I think you've got to. Yeah, and we ran the business as well for a bit, so navigating people was tricky. But I think, again, back to emotional connection, understanding audiences, and all that sort of thing, is that you've got to do that kind of empathy kind of thing to actually be able to kind of keep the brand moving forward.
Wow. And what do you think about the importance of personal branding with company branding?
Yeah, it's the question. It's actually, I wasn't going to predict you were going to ask that question, but it is one of the most often asked questions.
Is it?
Yeah, well, it is.
I hate to be predictable now.
Well, no, you've been predictable by being unpredictable until you became less predictable. But don't worry about it. It's one of those things. So I think that this sort of movement towards personal branding has obviously kind of picked up in the last sort of 10, 20 years because of social and stuff. I mean, we've talked about Ford. That was a personal brand, really. It was named after the owner of the business, but it's now a global corporate brand. I think with the people that I generally work with, they tend to start off as thinking about it as their own name, as being the personal brand. I think people have got a little bit beyond that, and it's about your own personality that you bring into the brand as well. And then they sort of assume that if you've got a corporate brand, you suddenly have to be something different, which is just not true. And this is where I think a lot of people kind of fall over themselves on LinkedIn, thinking that all of a sudden they've got to go and put a shirt and tie on to go and write on LinkedIn, and then they've got to kind of be having a barbecue to write on Facebook or something. And it's not necessarily true. And the people that get annoyed, I mean, I'm in a world where I get annoyed by cat videos on any platform. But I don't mind people sharing their personal stuff in LinkedIn. I don't mind people sharing their business stuff in Facebook. It's just what it is. And so with the personal versus corporate, I think, and I've got this sort of little test that I do. It's like 10 questions. It's like a little, not sort of psychometric test. It's not as subtle as that, but it's 10 questions that you can ask to know whether you should do a corporate or personal brand. And then the way that I devised it is that if you are very comfortable with exposure of yourself, then you can have a more personal brand because it's more about you. But some people are going to be more protected, and so they need to hide behind that corporate brand. But I still say that corporate brand should represent them. It's just not the name. And what I don't think you need to do is to create a big kind of hide behind this big corporate shiny thing and be a very different person underneath it, because that's not really going to connect with your people. So my personal, me personally, I've got a name, Nigel Davies. Hello. And you could say that's my personal brand. I like records, I drink Guinness, I read The Guardian. That's my personal brand. I've also got a business brand. It's not that corporate. It's called Pin Creative, P-I-N Creative. And that is kind of really handy for me to sort of glue everything together. So when I do my business stuff, even if I've launched something like Untangle Your Brand, it's a Pin Creative product, but it's called Untangle Your Brand, and I can just put it out there and people can engage with it, but it's by Pin Creative. Pin Creative is Nigel Davies. I think the personal bit that I put in there is that Pin, P-I-N, is my values. So from a branding point of view, pragmatic, inspiring, and nurture. Tell that I'm from the north. Inspire, I like creativity. Nurture, I like to learn stuff, and I like people to learn. And so I've put a bit of my DNA directly into the business, but it's quite subtle. So anyone who's doing that, I would say make sure there's DNA of your person in your corporate Otherwise, it won't really work. But it's definitely what I wouldn't. Again, this is something that I particularly dislike from a branding point of view, is just sort of calling the business your name and sort of creating some signature like a Virgin. No, sorry, like a Virgin logo. But got to remember, it wasn't Richard Branson's signature. It was a name they'd come up with that was a signature, so it wasn't a real signature. And that to me isn't really creating a brand. It's creating a mark, and marks are really important. You've got a name, you've got a mark, you've got a way of identifying it. It's a very traditional, the traditional definition of branding is putting a mark on a cow, isn't it? And that's kind of what you're doing. You're just saying, this is me, this is identifying this thing. You've not created a brand, you've created a scribble that people will recognise, a signature that's fine, but you won't really have created a brand.
And bringing up Richard Branson, of course, he is one of the classic examples of a personal brand. His stamp, his attitude, his ethos is in all of his companies, and you can see that.
Yeah, and that's where his personal brand, Richard Branson, it's still the Virgin brands and the Virgin brands that he's brought out that people kind of go out and buy, but they buy into him as the person and they buy the products he sells. What I think's interesting about Virgin, and when we talk about brand architecture, and there's different approaches to it, they have quite what we call an endorsed approach. So everything's called Virgin something: Virgin Cola, Virgin Brides, Virgin Trains, Virgin whatever. And Virgin's in there, but they all have their own personality. And I think if you identified as what at the heart of what Richard Branson is known for as a brand, probably something around, it's like spirit of adventure, taking risks, or something like that. And I think that core that he has does go into the businesses that he has. So Virgin Galactic, they're the ones that are going to work better than the ones that aren't really as adventurous. Virgin Cola, it's just a drink. And again, if you've got a personal brand and a personal ethos, and you're launching products that don't quite align with that, Virgin Brides wasn't probably the most successful thing that he did, because it probably wasn't that exciting and adventurous enough for him. And so the brand doesn't really ring true. Virgin Trains maybe too adventurous for some people, but that's the sort of way that it would go. And so he's got the personal brand, the DNAs are in all his businesses, and if it's not, they kind of go wrong.
That's an interesting point to think about, isn't it? That way, if you have a personal brand and you have a business, whatever you do next, make sure it does align with your values. Otherwise, there's going to be a disconnect, and it's not really going to work. It's not going to be you.
Yeah, and straight away, and that's why, back to the brand donut and the jam at the centre, whatever that kind of brand, I call it a brand core, brand heart, lots of people call it different things. If that's not true, and that should be the guiding thing for everything that you do as a business, it should be the thing that actually glues everything together. And if it's not the thing, then you're not going to do very well with it. That's kind of typically the thing. So Nike might be all about pushing athletic boundaries or something like that. It's going to be something, don't know if it's definite. So they will only choose sports people who are going to push athletic boundaries. They probably aren't going to have too many snooker players. But they might do. I don't know. Now we're going to find out that there's a whole bunch of snooker players that are sponsored by Nike, but I suspect that they're going to stick to Wimbledon champions. And
I think you're right. Like Nike probably doesn't do a range of black waistcoats and comfortable shoes.
And darts players. There's probably not as many darts players that are sponsored by Nike either. But there's, again, this is how it works. There's lots of brands that want to be associated with darts players and snooker players. I'm not just thinking about the 70s when I was in Sheffield at the Crucible, and they were there drinking lager and smoking. But there's still that kind of thing about you've got to connect the two together if you're promoting or sponsoring someone and you've got a brand. And you see it quite a lot, really. You can tell when the front person isn't quite aligned with the brand. And it's a big business. There's bigger people than me out there thinking about this stuff on a daily basis. So
well, it's certainly given me a lot to think about. We're almost out of time. Can you believe?
I can't believe.
I know. Well, it's incredible. I know. Maybe you've lost the time again. Maybe it's gone.
Yeah.
So before we wrap up, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, to work with you, to talk about records, or maybe to be on your podcast that you're going to be launching soon.
It's definitely going to be launching soon. It's going to be called. I know what it's going to be called. But I haven't recorded the first one. But yeah, if anyone wants to reach out for me, then my details, my business is pincreative.co.uk. There is a sort of satellite site for untangleyourbrand.com. So that kind of has all the accessible stuff for independent business owners, people that are trying to kind of get through the muddle of branding. The podcast is going to be called Brands and Bands. So I'll be talking about brands and bands. So I'm going to be talking about branding a bit, and I'll be talking about records, because that's kind of one of my big passions is music. So rather than just sit there talking about branding all day, like we didn't even talk about music really. We didn't. We didn't.
You're gutted, aren't you? You're gutted.
Yeah, well, I am, because my first question that I ask people, I'm going to ask you this now, and you probably weren't expecting this, is what is your favourite band?
It's a band I've never seen live because I'm not old enough. It would be Queen.
Ah, Queen.
It would be Queen.
You're not old enough to see Queen.
Not really. No. I mean, I could see them live now, but there's two of them.
Yeah.
And they're like 600 quid for half of Queen and Adam Lambert, and I don't really want that. No, it's Freddie or nothing. No, Freddie died when I was. When was it? I think I was about 16. So I wasn't old enough to see Queen.
Yeah. So, and actually, when I asked this question to people when they first start working with them, so if I asked you to describe what Queen meant to you in a few words, just a few words on the spot.
Oh, it would be glam, camp, and outrageous.
Outrageous, yeah. And you can generally do that pretty much on the spot. I'm not going to ask you this question, but I do that with people, and I talk about Adam and the Ants, pirate glamour punk rock. That's kind of what Adam and the Ants mean to me. I then say, right, now can you describe your business in a few words like that? If I was to say, tell me your maybe your business is all about glam, camp, outrageousness, but they struggle. They really struggle, and they need to be able to express their brand in that simple way like they can about their favourite bands and the things that they know about and have loved for years. And once you can get to that point, then you really kind of can create that connection with other people, because then you can explain to them why you love Queen or why you love Adam and the Ants or New Order.
So when you love your business as much as you love your favourite band, that's when you know you're going the right way.
Yeah, and when you can express it in that very succinct kind of direct emotional way, then you're probably getting into a happy place with your business as well. If you're struggling and you're fumbling about going, well, we sort of do this, I like it because, and maybe one day, then you're probably not going to get there too soon, and you probably need to untangle your brand. That's probably what I would say.
And that's a great fitting point to end on there. Untangle your brand, and I will put all of the links that you've mentioned below the podcast as well. So anybody that wants to.
Because my first question that I ask people, I'm going to ask you this now, and you probably weren't expecting this, is what is your favourite band?
It's a band I've never seen live because I'm not old enough. It would be Queen.
Ah, Queen.
It would be Queen.
You're not old enough to see Queen.
Not really. No. I mean, I could see them live now, but there's two of them.
Yeah.
And they're like 600 quid for half of Queen.
Yeah, so I'm starting that. I've got to get an episode. I've put myself a task of getting an episode out this month.
All right.
But I'm starting off, because this is the start of my podcast journey. So starting off just doing a few me talking to me type things. And then I'm going to start building it out a little bit, and not sort of push myself. But I thought it'd be a good thing to do. Clearly, you think it's a good thing to do for your business.
Yeah, no, I mean, I had an interview yesterday with a lady that also runs a podcast, and she's been doing it for years. She's on like season 8 or season 9 of her podcasts, and she's a business coach. And she was telling me how she gets people coming to her knowing stories about her personal stories, and she doesn't know how she's heard them because they've listened to a podcast. And it gets over that problem of getting to know, like, and trust somebody because they already know, like, and trust you because they've listened to you on the podcast.
Yeah.
So it's a great tool for bringing
Yeah.
people into your business that
Yeah.
so they're not cold, effectively. So yeah, it is a brilliant thing to do.